The notification came at 11:47 on a Wednesday night, and I almost didn't open it. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my apartment in Denver, still in my work clothes, eating leftover pad thai out of the container because I hadn't had time for a real meal since Sunday. My laptop was open to the Hendricks deposition I was supposed to finish reviewing before morning. My phone buzzed on the table and I glanced at the screen out of habit the way you do when you've spent 5 years as a corporate litigator training yourself to be available at all hours for clients who believe their problems are the center of the universe. The sender was a name I didn't recognize. A firm called Hargrove Capital Group. The subject line read, "Second notice delinquent personal, guarantee immediate response required." I set down my fork. I told myself it was a mistake. A misdirected email. Spam dressed up in formal language. I opened it anyway, because I've spent enough time in courtrooms to know that ignoring something doesn't make it disappear. It just means you're unprepared when it shows up in front of a judge. The email was not spam. It was a formal collection notice addressed to me by name. It referenced a personal guarantee I had allegedly signed 18 months ago, tied to a small business acquisition loan of $320,000. The borrowing entity was listed as Callaway Home Solutions, LLC. The loan had been in technical default for 63 days. The notice informed me, with the cheerful efficiency of a legal document, that as the named personal guarantor, I was now individually liable for the full outstanding balance. I read the name of the LLC again, Callaway Home Solutions. My last name is Callaway. My brother runs a home renovation contracting business. The pad thai went cold on the table. I sat very still, the way I do when I'm in a deposition and a witness says something that changes the entire shape of a case. You don't react. You collect. You wait. You think about what you're going to do next. What I was thinking, in that moment, was this. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Colorado. A finding of financial fraud or default on a personal guarantee, especially one tied to a commercial entity, can be reported to the Colorado Supreme Court Office of Attorney Regulation Counsel. They can open a disciplinary investigation. In serious cases, they can suspend a license. The thing I had spent 7 years and $200,000 in student debt building the career that had kept me sane through every holiday dinner, every passive-aggressive phone call, every time my mother looked at my brother like he hung the moon and looked at me like I was a tenant she tolerated, could be threatened by a document I had never seen before in my life. Have you ever had the ground drop out from under you while you were completely still? Let me know your story in the comments. Because that Wednesday night, sitting at my kitchen table in Denver, I understood for the first time what my clients mean when they say they felt the walls close in. I pulled up the state business registry. Callaway Home Solutions LLC had been registered 14 months ago. The registered agent was my brother. The secondary contact listed was my mother's address in Pueblo. And there, in the member information field, was my name, not as a member, as a personal guarantor. A signature I had never provided. I didn't cry. I didn't call my brother. I didn't text my mother to ask what was happening with a string of question marks like some version of myself from 5 years ago would have done. I opened a new document and started writing down everything I knew, everything I needed to find out, and exactly what I was going to do about it. The rage was there, but it was quiet. It had edges. I need to tell you something about my family, so you understand what came next. My father passed away 6 years ago, heart attack, 58 years old, which everyone agreed was too young, and which my mother handled by deciding that my brother, the older one, the one with the big handshake and the easy smile, was now the man of the family. My brother had been riding that title ever since. He'd started 3 businesses in 6 years, a landscaping company that lasted 8 months, a food truck concept that never actually acquired a truck, and now, apparently, Callaway Home Solutions LLC, which had managed to acquire a $320,000 loan before collapsing into default. Every time one of those ventures failed, my mother found a reason it wasn't his fault. The market, the timing, the partners he'd chosen who hadn't believed in him enough. She never once looked at the pattern. And me? I was the one who had moved to Denver for law school and stayed. The one who called every Sunday and flew home for Christmas and quietly transferred money when things got tight, which they always did, because my brother was always starting something new, and the gap between starting and earning was always somehow my problem to bridge. I'd sent $40,000 home over the past 4 years. $40,000, I told myself, was family, was love, was what you do. That Wednesday night, staring at a default notice with my forged signature on it, I finally understood what it actually was. It was a price of admission to a family that had never once questioned whether the admission fee was fair. I called my college roommate, who is one of the best financial fraud attorneys in Colorado. She did not seem surprised that I was calling at midnight. She also did not seem surprised by what I told her. She said, very calmly, "Send me everything. Don't contact your brother or your mother until we talk. And Maya, get your credit report tonight." I got my credit report. There were 2 additional accounts I didn't recognize. A business credit card with a $16,000 balance, and a second loan smaller, $48,000, from a different lender, also with my name listed as guarantor. Also in default. By 1 in the morning, my roommate had started building a file. By 2, she had flagged a forensic document examiner she wanted to bring in. By 3, I had created an encrypted folder on my laptop and named it exactly what it was: a case file. I didn't sleep. I called in sick to the office the next morning for the first time in 3 years. My roommate came over with coffee and her laptop, and we sat at my kitchen table and she walked me through what she was finding. The signatures on both loan documents were good. Whoever had done this had practiced. But a forensic examination would expose the inconsistencies that a lending officer reviewing paperwork quickly would never catch. How did they get a lender to approve a loan with a forged guarantor? I asked. She looked at me over her coffee cup. The same way they always do. They submitted supporting documentation that made the application look legitimate. Pay stubs, a tax return, a letter of professional standing. She paused. Maya, someone provided your bar license number. It's on the application. I set my coffee down very slowly. My bar license number is not publicly searchable, I said. You have to know where to look. I know, she said. There were only a handful of people who would have known where to look. And of those people, only one had a reason to use it. The confrontation didn't come from me. It came from my mother. She called that afternoon while I was on the phone with my roommate reviewing the second loan document. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "Your brother says you've been asking questions about his business. What is going on? Call me back right now." I read the text. I noticed she had not asked if I was okay. I noticed she had not said, "Is everything all right? Are you in trouble? What can we do?" She had said, "What is going on?" As if I were the one who had done something that required an explanation. Then my brother texted, "Look, I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like. Call me." I didn't call him. I forwarded both messages to my roommate, and I turned my phone face down on the counter. That evening, she called me back with something she hadn't expected to find. "The loan applications," she said, "were not submitted by your brother." I waited. The primary broker on both deals, the person who packaged the application, identified the lender, and facilitated the approval, is a man named Gerald Whitmore. I didn't recognize the name. "I ran him," she said. "He's a financial consultant based in Pueblo. But here's what's interesting, Maya. He and your father were business partners for almost 12 years before your father died." I sat down on my couch. My father's partner was a man named Dale. Dale something. My mother always called him Dale. "Gerald Dale Whitmore," my roommate said. "Goes by Dale." My father's business partner. The man my mother had spent the last 6 years describing as the person who had cheated my father out of his share of their consulting firm, who had forced a buyout at a fraction of market value 2 months before my father's death, who had essentially stolen my father's legacy and left our family with nothing but the insurance money and a house that was paid off. My mother mentioned Dale Whitmore, the way some people mention a natural disaster, something catastrophic that happened to them, something that proved how unfair the world was, something that absolved everyone else in the story of responsibility. "He's agreed to meet," my roommate said. "Tomorrow morning." He reached out to me. Maya. He reached out to me before I even found his name. He was already waiting. I drove to the meeting with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind running through every possible version of what was about to happen. The office building was unremarkable. Conference room on the 3rd floor. My roommate was already there when I arrived, and across the table from her was a man in his late 60s, gray-haired, with the kind of careful posture that comes from spending decades in rooms where what you said and how you said it mattered. He stood up when I walked in. "You look like your father," he said. The way he used to look right before he walked into a negotiation. Like you're already 3 moves ahead and you're just waiting for everyone else to catch up. "My mother told me you stole from him," I said. I sat down. "She told me you forced him out of the business for pennies and he never recovered from it." He nodded slowly. "I know what she told you," he said. "I've known for 6 years. I also know what actually happened." He folded his hands on the table. "Your father and I had a disagreement about the future of the firm, not about money, about your brother." I went still. "Your father loved your brother," he said carefully. "But he also knew who your brother was. He had watched him for 30 years. He told me, 8 months before he died, that he was changing the structure of his estate, that he was concerned about what would happen to the business assets and the insurance proceeds if they passed directly to your mother and brother without any protection in place. He paused. He was also concerned about you, about whether you would be taken care of, or whether you would be his word utilized. The word landed somewhere deep. Your mother found out about the changes he was planning to make, he continued. She did not agree with them. There was a significant conflict. 2 months before your father died, she presented him with a document, a revised agreement that effectively transferred his share of the firm to her name and removed me as a co-equal partner. She told him I had agreed to the terms. I had not. I had never seen the document. He looked at me steadily. She forged my signature, Maya. And then, when your father died before he could investigate further, she dissolved the partnership entirely, told your father's clients I had stolen from the estate, and used the social pressure of grief to make sure no one questioned her version of events. I heard the echo before he finished the sentence. The same method. 20 years apart. Different signature, same author. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. Why didn't you sue her? Why didn't you tell me any of this? I tried, he said. For 2 years, I tried. And then I realized something. He leaned forward slightly. Your mother had built an entire community identity around being the wronged widow. If I challenged her publicly, I would look like a man attacking a grieving woman. Even if I won legally, I would lose everything else. He paused. And you were in law school. You were 23 years old. You were building something real, the first person in your family to do it. I was not going to drop a bomb into the middle of that. So you waited, I said. I watched, he said. I kept a record. And I waited for the day she made a mistake large enough that the truth could come out in a way that couldn't be dismissed. He looked at my roommate, then back at me. Your brother's loan applications are that mistake, he said. But they're not his idea, Maya. I've traced the origination. He found a lender. Yes. He needed the money. Yes. But your name on those documents, your bar license number on that application, that detail came from your mother. She knew where to find it. She's the one who suggested using you as the guarantor. I have the text messages. He opened a folder and placed a printed document on the table. It was a text exchange between my brother and my mother. In it, my mother suggested in her particular careful way, the way she had of making criminal suggestions sound like common sense, that the application would be much stronger with a professional guarantor. Someone with assets, someone with a verifiable career, someone whose name the lenders would trust. And then, 3 texts later, she sent my bar license number. She had saved it. She had kept it somewhere, for exactly this kind of moment. I read the texts twice. I put the document back on the table. I looked at my roommate. What's our first move? I asked. The next 2 weeks were the quietest, most surgical period of my professional life. My roommate filed for an emergency credit freeze. We engaged the forensic document examiner, who produced a 40-page report confirming that both signatures were forgeries. We filed for an emergency injunction, freezing my brother's business accounts and any assets held in my mother's name that were connected to either loan. My brother called 11 times. I answered once. On day 4, long enough to say, do not contact me again until you have an attorney present, and anything you say to me is discoverable. He hung up. My mother did not call. She sent my aunt instead. My aunt called on a Tuesday evening and opened with, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you are tearing this family apart, and your father would be devastated. I listened until she paused for breath, and then I said, my father would be devastated that someone used his daughter's professional license to commit fraud. I'd like you to pass that along. Then I ended the call. She showed up at my apartment building the following Saturday morning. I watched her on the lobby camera. She spoke to the front desk for 7 minutes, growing visibly frustrated, before leaving. I had updated my visitor list the day I filed the injunction. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. My brother hired an attorney who spent most of his time looking like he'd been given an impossible assignment. My mother did not attend in person. She submitted a written statement describing the loan as a family financial arrangement and characterizing the signatures as having been provided with my implied consent. My roommate did not raise her voice once during the hearing. She presented the forensic report. She presented the loan applications with my bar license number embedded in the supporting documentation. She presented Gerald Whitmore's sworn affidavit, which included the original partnership agreements from my father's firm, the text exchange between my mother and brother, and a full accounting of the dissolved partnership's assets. Assets that, according to the original agreement, should have passed to me as my father's designated heir under the terms he had intended to finalize before his death. And then she presented one more document. My father, it turned out, had taken one step before his death that my mother had not been able to undo. He had designated Gerald Whitmore as the executor of a separate legal instrument, not a will, which my mother had controlled, but a revocable trust he had established independently 18 months before he died. The trust held a portfolio of investment accounts. Not enormous, but not nothing. $214,000, which had been sitting in Gerald Whitmore's careful stewardship for 6 years, waiting for the conditions of distribution to be met. The condition was specific. It was almost like my father knew. The trust was to be distributed to me, and only to me, upon evidence of a fraudulent claim made against me by a member of my immediate family. The judge read the trust clause twice. He looked up at my brother's attorney. He looked at the written statement my mother had submitted. He looked at the forensic report. He did not take long. The loans were declared null and void as they pertained to me. The forgeries were confirmed on the official record. The injunction was made permanent. My brother was ordered to satisfy the outstanding loan balances from his own assets, which his attorney quietly acknowledged were insufficient to cover the full amount, meaning the lenders would pursue collection through standard channels. The court found sufficient evidence to refer the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal review, specifically regarding the use of my professional license number in a fraudulent loan application. My mother's written statement was entered into the court record as Exhibit G. I walked out of that courthouse into November air that felt colder and cleaner than anything I'd breathed in years. Gerald Whitmore was waiting on the steps. He handed me a folder with the trust distribution paperwork. He didn't frame it as charity. He didn't tell me my father would be proud, which I would not have been able to handle. He just said, "This was always supposed to be yours. I'm sorry it took this long." I shook his hand and I meant it. That evening I sat in my apartment and I did something I had been putting off for months. I went through my phone and I deleted every transaction record I had saved from the last 4 years, the Venmo transfers, the wire confirmations, the screenshots of my mother's bank account numbers that I had kept because some part of me always knew I might need them. I deleted the folder I had been keeping since that Wednesday night with the pad thai, the one with the loan documents and the forensic report and the text exchanges. I had printed everything for the court record. The digital version was just wait. I sat there afterward and thought about my brother. I thought about who he was at 12, before the dynamic had calcified into what it became, the golden child coasting on charm, the one who never had to develop the muscles that come from being told no. I had spent years being quietly furious at him. Sitting there in the quiet of my apartment, I realized something different. I wasn't furious anymore. I was sad in a way that had no heat in it. He had been just as shaped by my mother's choices as I had just shaped towards softness instead of silence. That didn't make him innocent, but it made him something more complicated than a villain. My mother was a different matter. She had kept my bar license number. She had kept it the way you keep a tool, the way you keep something specifically because you plan to use it. And the thing about people who see you as a tool is that they never stop. You can reason with them, and they will agree and then do it again. You can forgive them, and they will take the forgiveness as an invitation. You can distance yourself slowly, carefully, with all the grace of someone who still believes the relationship is salvageable, and they will close the distance every time, because your boundary only reads to them as a negotiating position. The only thing that actually stops it is a hard line drawn somewhere they cannot cross. I sent my mother a letter, not an email, a physical letter, because I am an attorney and I understand the weight of paper. I did not write it in anger. I wrote it the way I write emotion, clearly, factually, without embellishment. I told her I knew about the partnership. I told her I knew about my father's trust. I told her I knew she had given my bar license number to my brother and that she had suggested my name as the guarantor on a loan she knew I hadn't signed. I told her the court record existed and was public. I told her that any further contact with me or my residence or my place of employment would result in an immediate filing for a civil protection order. I told her I hoped she found whatever she was actually looking for, because it had never been in me. I sealed the envelope. I walked to the mailbox on my corner in the early dark of November, and I dropped it in. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the cold metal of the mailbox, and I thought about my father, who had seen this coming well enough to build a quiet fortress against it 20 years before the siege arrived. There are people who will tell you that cutting family is always a tragedy, that blood is supposed to mean something permanent, something that obligates you. I used to believe that, or at least I used to act like I believed it, which is close enough that it made no practical difference. What I know now is this: obligation is not the same as love. Proximity is not the same as loyalty. And the people who insist most loudly that you owe them your presence, your resources, your professional reputation, your signature. Those people are not making an argument from love. They're making an argument from need, from entitlement, from the simple fact that they have been taking from you for so long that they have forgotten there was ever a choice involved. You are allowed to remember that there was always a choice. A few weeks after the hearing, I went back to Pueblo, not to see my mother. I went to my father's grave, which is in a cemetery at the edge of town where the land starts to flatten out toward the mountains, and I stood there for a while in the cold. I thought about what Gerald Whitmore had told me, that my father had spent the last months of his life trying to find a way to protect me without blowing up the family, that he had known, on some level, what I was walking back into every time I came home, that he had done what he could, quietly and carefully, through the only instrument he fully controlled. He had trusted the right person with the right document. He had been patient. He had waited for the conditions to be met. I am my father's daughter. I drove back to Denver that evening. The city came into view from the highway the way it always does, spread wide across the plain with the mountains sitting behind it like something permanent. I've lived here for 7 years and it still looks like a place I chose, which is different from a place I ended up. That difference matters more than most people realize. I have been thinking lately about the word inheritance, what it actually means, stripped of the legal definition. In the legal sense, inheritance is straightforward. It's the transfer of assets at the time of death, governed by a will or a trust, or the laws of intestate succession. Clean, transactional, definite. But there's another kind of inheritance that no one writes a document for, the one you carry in the way you hold yourself in a difficult room, the way you get quiet instead of loud when something goes wrong, the way you trust the process, even when the process is slow and the people around you are losing their composure. My father was a man who, when faced with someone trying to take what was his, built something careful and airtight and patient, instead of fighting in a way that could be used against him. I know where I got it, and I know now that it was always mine to keep. Thank you for being here and listening to this story. If you've ever been treated like a resource by the people who were supposed to be your family, if you've ever had to make the decision to stop paying a debt you never actually agreed to take on, leave your story in the comments. I read every one of them. If this reached someone who needed it today, share it with them. And if you felt even a fraction of what I felt walking out of that courthouse, hit the like button. I'll see you in the next one.